Okay, so Hellboy Volume 1 of the library edition arrived in the mail today, and I figured this is a good time to tell you the story about how I bought Volume 2. I actually have all of the other volumes, even including Hellboy and Hell, so I got the first volume last, and here's how that happened. It's about 2009, just as these books were coming out, and I had some time to kill between college classes, so I go into this bookstore. Now, what you have to understand, in Slovenia, we don't have comic book stores where you can go in and buy a single issue of a comic book. If you want a comic, you have to walk into a bookstore and hope they have the comics you want, and they only sell, graphic novels and collections and omnibuses and trade paperbacks. So anyway, it was just around the time that these books were released for the first time. So I walk in and I see these books, right? And Mike Mignola is my favorite comic book artist. He's probably my favorite artist in general. And I see these beautiful plus-size hardcover, beautiful binding books, and I figure, wow, these are gorgeous. Maybe I'll buy one day, But I think they just had the first two ones, 5 of each. So I look at them a bit because they're gorgeous, and then I go to class. A few days later, same thing, had some time to kill, so I walk into the bookstore, and what do I see? They bought all of these library editions except for one of the first edition and one of the second edition. I mean, they went like hotcakes. There are comic books in that bookstore, they're still there to this day, but these books went in a few days, so I'm a pretty frugal person. Like, I'm not a big spender, I'm not an impulsive buyer, but I just had to have these. However, you have to keep in mind that I was pretty broke at the time. So, broke college kid, you have to have that in mind this entire story. So and these books cost about, let's say, 40 euros. I had maybe 10 euros of disposable income. So what I did was I took the book and I gave it to the sales lady, and I asked her, could you please hold on to this book for me and I'll buy it in a week. And she said, yeah, sure. So she was kind enough to do that, and I knew I had a week to get 30 euros. So the first thing I did was I took a bunch of books that I would never read or I've already read and figured they're no use to me anymore. So I just took them to an antique store and said, hey, would you be willing to give me any money for these books? And they said, yeah, sure, we'll give you 10 euros. Okay, so now I had 20 euros. That's 50% of the way, right? So I'm asking around, people, hey, do you need any logotypes, any illustrations? Can I do anything for you? Just so I could get those last 20 euros. Remember, broke college kid. So nothing for a few days when, wouldn't you know it, some guy approaches me and says, hey, we're making this zine or magazine for a student organization, and we would like to have, a small comic on one of the pages. Would you be willing to make one? And I said, yes, absolutely, under the condition that you can pay me, within the next few days, and 20 euros. And that was the only comic I was ever commissioned to make. But I made those 20 euros, and 1 week to the day I walk into the bookstore and I bought Volume 2. Now, why did I decide on Volume 2 instead of Volume 1? Well, 2 reasons. First, Volume 2 is a bunch of stories. You see, it's a bunch of stories. It's not just one story. And it's more diverse. You get more different content. And Volume 1 hasn't aged that well because it's, it has that limited color palette from the early 90s. You see, it's a lot of blues and purples and secondary colors. So I figured I'll get Volume 2, and one day when I'm not so broke, I'll get the other ones. Which I did. So a few years later, I made my first online purchase. I bought Volume 3 and 4, which was a very bad experience because those books got crushed. I mean, like something heavy fell on them and moved. It was pretty horrible. But I got the refund and they sent me another copy, but still it's a waste because these books are really beautiful and you got these amazing sketches at the end. So then every year I bought 2 more volumes until here we are at last. Yesterday Hellboy and Hell arrived in the mail, and today we have Hellboy Volume 1. So say it with me now. Collection complete.